Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining another episode of Chat About AI. Today, I have another incredible guest.
Yep.
Zach Rattner is the founder and the CTO of Yembo. And he's here to tell us why you need to do something with AI today. Zach is going to tell you why.
Good morning, Vicky. Thanks for
Good
having me. Happy to be
morning.
here.
Nice to see you, Zach.
Likewise. Thank you.
So tell us
So,
more. Tell us a little bit about Yembo.
sure. So, we got started relatively long time ago in the AI world. So, Yembo was founded in 2016. And back in those days, there was this popular academic benchmark called ImageNet. And that was a competition that universities would submit AI tools into, as well as corporate research labs. And the basic idea, you can think of it like a 1,000-way multiple choice test, where I would show a picture and you would have to classify what is that a picture of. And it's relatively easy for a human to do it. They were benchmarked at around maybe 95% or so accuracy, but difficult for AI to do it. And for years, the rate of progress was relatively small. That accuracy was improving single digit percentage or less year over year. And that's because what was happening was you would need to be able to identify by hand. So that means if you wanted to build AI to detect a chair, for instance, you'd have to look at, there are usually 4 lines, you call those legs, then it flattens out, that's the seat, then there's a back. And an engineer would have to go and define mathematically, usually on a grayscale image, what is a chair. And then if you finish that and you want to go and make a sofa or a cat or a dog, you have to kind of start again from scratch. So it's called hand engineering because somebody's using their hands and building out what it takes to do that. Then in 2012, this new technology called deep learning came out, and that was modeled after neurons in the human brain. And what deep learning allowed us to do was not have to hand engineer all those features. That we'd be able to just give a bunch of examples and say, hey, these are cats, these are dogs, these are chairs, these are sofas. AI, you go figure it out. And for the first time, you'd be able to allow the computer to learn on its own. So you're no longer hand engineering. And what happened was about 10 years of progress happened in one submission. So before we were looking at around single digits, this one's about 10% more accurate. And in 2015, it got incrementally better and better. And Microsoft had a submission that crossed that threshold of 95%. So humans were baselined at 95%. So 2015 rolls around, and all of a sudden computers are better than people at identifying objects and images. And just about nobody knows that yet. And if you went to Silicon Valley in those days, it seemed like everybody was focused on a relatively few number of applications: drones, self-driving cars, all those kinds of applications. But if computers are really better than people at identifying objects and images, this isn't going to change just drones and self-driving cars. This is going to change everything. And that's what I realized with Yembo. My wife was working in the logistics space at a large international moving company. And the more I learned about this space, the more I realized, wow, it's not like for lack of trying. But if you go on like the Better Business Bureau and type in moving company, a lot of people tend to have complaints. It's just, it's really logistically complicated. Expectations get kind of mismatched. There are unscrupulous movers or also unscrupulous customers. And it's just really hard to kind of rise above it all, because the difference of like miscounting how many rolls of tape you need to bring can be the difference between profitable and unprofitable in this industry. So we realized that there was a real opportunity to help this space. Let the companies that are really trying to give A+ service rise to the top, do an amazing job, and let the folks that are kind of benefiting off of the fact that the pricing is opaque and I can tell you it'll be $1,000 and then charge you 3 or 4 when I have everything you own on a truck, we'll let those people go out of business. But the cream of the crop type of folks that are wanting to give a better level of service, AI just kind of allows them to go one level up in a way that is just completely unable to be done without AI. It's just too much labor. Typical product that we have, customer will scan quick videos of their room, maybe 20, 30 seconds per room. And our AI identifies the items. If you did this room behind here, it would count the wall art, the TV, how many cartons it would take the boxes to go in. But the real value is you get the pictures of every single item in the home. So a typical American home, maybe 3-bed, 2-bath, will have about 300 different images, 300 different items in there. So if you want to be prepared for the move, that's super helpful. But if you don't have AI and you're just looking at a video feed of somebody's home and capturing 300 images, you'll just run out of time in the day. So
Yeah.
these are the kind of applications where I feel like a lot of folks who are new to AI overlook it. But the idea is not that AI is replacing a human. The idea is that the person who's using the AI is able to do something bigger or better or faster that is just completely impossible. Or if it's not impossible, maybe it's infeasible to be done with the
Mm.
economic or time constraints that you have without AI. And I feel like there are so many applications, and it's kind of like day one. And that's why I'm really optimistic personally, and I encourage all of your listeners to find some application that the day-to-day jobs that you have, the classes that you're in, wherever you are, those are the use cases where people are applying AI now. And nobody really knows how all the rules are going to be written. We're figuring it out now. So if you want to have a seat at that table, it's probably a
Yeah.
window of like 12, 18 months. And then after that, everyone will have figured it out and the opportunity will have gone.
12, 18 months. I mean, that doesn't sound like a very long time, right? Considering that it was what, 2015, you mentioned that we had 95% accuracy in image recognition. And now, 10 years later, we have another year before everyone kind of knows what they're doing with AI. It's
Yeah, I don't
incredible.
know if you've seen this in your circles, but I feel like the perception of AI has completely changed since ChatGPT came out.
Yeah.
That it sort of became, it had its iPhone moment, and now it's not something that academic researchers play around with. That when I talk to folks who are not engineers or in other industries, there's generally this sense of inevitability now. Well,
Mm.
people kind of see the value of it and they're saying, okay, it's going to come. I don't know exactly how. I have these concerns, but someone's going to figure it out. Whereas 2018, 19, 20, it was more like the jury was out. Like, I don't know if it's here to stay. It could be a passing trend. And you get like into some other tech bubbles in the past and things like that. But it seems like the public perception has kind of grown a bit with the technology.
So true. I mean, it's as a product manager in the past, I can tell you just, my largest product I built was 6 million customers, and that was a combination of AT&T Uverse customers and Yahoo customers. And I thought 6 million people potentially are using this product. And think about ChatGPT. What is the latest for that? It's like, what, hundreds of millions of people, and you're designing something for them. And not only are you the design is not like particular to what you're doing. They can actually customize it, personalize it in any way they
Mm-hmm.
want. So the interaction using, natural language, whatever language it um, is incredibly, democratizing. I mean, it's just you don't have to translate things anymore. You can talk to machines, and you don't really need to go to school for 4 years learning computer science.
Exactly. And I think if there's not really one known threshold for what a mass market product is, but if you were to just randomly pick 100 million and say, hey, that's
Yeah.
you've pretty much conquered the world if you're at 100 million. I thought this was pretty crazy when I learned this. So if you look at the COVID vaccine, the Pfizer
Mhm.
COVID shot with all the government subsidies, and remember all the way back to 2020 when
Yeah.
that was
Who
dominating
could
the news
forget?
cycle.
Yeah.
But with Operation Warp Speed and all the other things that were going on at that time, it took about 4 months to go from 0 to 100 million customers, if you consider
Yeah.
someone who
Right.
receives the
Yeah.
vaccine a customer. Then ChatGPT comes out in November of 2022, and by January, 2 months later, it reaches 100 million. And if you think about like how stacked the deck was in favor of the COVID shot, this is like
Right.
the permission to go outside and to meet your friends again. And I think that speaks to just the value that this natural language interface, where you can communicate with the AI in a much more natural way.
Yeah.
There's no owner's manual for ChatGPT. And I think that's really the tip of the iceberg in terms of these AI applications. Where under the hood, we had transformer architecture since
Mhm.
2017 or so. It's not like they did pioneer, but it wasn't like everything that they did was brand new. I would say the best thing that ChatGPT kind of pioneered was an incredibly easy to use user experience. It looks
Yeah.
like a text message. You've been texting your friends, now you just text this thing. And I think there's a lot of value to be had there when it kind of gets injected into the workflow in a form factor that is easy for somebody to use.
Yes. It 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 it's so powerful, and you think, comparing to the shot, like, that was necessary for your health because people were literally dying, right? Versus this is a product which is nice. I would consider it nice to have. Like, yeah, sure, you
Hmm.
should interact, but it wasn't like, uh, you know, good for your health or for your survival or anything in that matter. So the fact that it's reached this level is, I think, also incredible. Um, I think one of the things you do an incredible job at is you're a big proponent of, hey, identify the business problem and
Hmm.
then figure out how to apply AI to it. Not the opposite where people are like, oh, we have a chatbot or we need to create like this gifting suggestion app or something like that. You really encourage people to look at the hard problems, right?
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that. How do you find those hard problems that you can solve?
And I think you hit the nail on the head, Vicky. As you said, you start with the problem.
Yeah.
And I've been a CTO for almost 10 years now. And there's a text message that I always kind of chuckle to myself when I get from various people, but it's, hey, can we grab coffee? I have an app idea. And
Yeah.
I just kind of, it's like, I
Right.
used to, I used to take them a little bit more seriously, but now I just kind of chuckle when it happens.
Yeah.
And at the root of it, what generally happens when you take the bait and you go to these coffees is somebody has an idea
Mhm.
for a solution,
Yeah.
and the solution is what's kind of lodged in their mind. So they spent all this time thinking about the solution and the features and, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you could do this? Wouldn't it be cool if you could do that? But they didn't spend as much time on the problem that you're trying to solve.
Mm.
And that's why I feel like oftentimes those kinds of conversations don't really go anywhere. That I
Yeah.
wish my friends would text me, hey man, I've got a really thorny problem. Can we
Yeah.
go have coffee?
Right.
Because then you don't have to fight upstream to get adoption because the implementation that you have is solving an actual problem. So what
Right.
we were doing with Yembo when we were first starting off is, again, we had this understanding that computers are better than people at identifying objects and images. It's kind of academic and hard to wrap
Sure.
your mind around. So we had to go and understand the moving process around, you can't just like use AI here. You have to figure out, okay, what is the workflow? What are the barriers to adopting? Are people going to be willing to click a link? Are they going to be willing to record a video? Do they prefer to shake a hand?
Mm.
And will you be able to get the AI accurate enough? There are all these kinds of issues that came up around it. So we didn't come in super opinionated, saying here's exactly how it has to be. We showed some prototypes to some early prospective customers, and we just asked them. And then when we had those kinds of conversations, we learned all of the different pain points that were coming up, where it takes
Mm.
$200 to $300 to do an in-person inspection, where when people get busy and I don't have time to drive out there, that lead might go away, but it could be a good lead. I just didn't have time to shake their
Right.
hand, drive out to their house and learn, is that going to work or not? So we realized saving the drive time is a really big value proposition. And then we had people who started to use the product, they were saving the drive time, and then they kind of unlocked, we solved the first problem, then the second problem popped up and became number one, which
Yeah.
was, now it takes a lot of time to go through and review all these things. Because when we first started, we realized, hey, people have a lot of different things in their homes. If we build a workflow where it's expected to be 100% accurate out of the gate, we're
Yeah.
just going to disappoint people. We'll have churn problems and we'll probably not exist long enough to be able to iterate our way there. So what we did was we came up with this intellectually honest value proposition that didn't require the AI to be perfect. We said, we're saving you that drive time. And we did our homework. We talked to enough customers. We knew that that message kind of resonated.
Yeah.
And we said, you're not going to be able to do zero review. You'll need to
Mhm.
look at it. But the alternative would have been 60 minutes, and now it's going to take you 30. And then we're able to kind of categorize all the different things that people are doing when they're fixing mistakes, and then use that information to make the AI better. 30 becomes 25, becomes 20, becomes 22, and your value prop just kind of gradually becomes more and more salient.
Yeah.
And that's how we kind of iterated our way to 20 plus countries now. And it wasn't coming in saying exactly how it's going to be. It was, we had this kind of fundamental assumption that AI is going to help in this space. And then we had an open mind around really learning what the problems were that these clients were facing and
Mhm.
listening to them. We'd ship every week. We'd always iterate on our product, make improvements.
Yeah.
Maybe if you weren't 100% convinced, you turn it on for somebody, see how it goes, compare, share notes, things like that. But I think having that kind of open mind around what is the problem you're trying to solve, what are the who are the stakeholders that you need to get involved with, that it's usually not just like an IT initiative and no one else in the business knows what's going on.
Mm.
And then how long do you need to take? If you have like a really short time horizon and you want value in 30 days, you probably shouldn't spin up an R&D team. But
Yeah.
if you're doing longer bets, if you're doing brain implants or trying to colonize Mars, then having like a 10 plus year time horizon is fine. And I
Yeah.
think those are the kinds of conversations that I wish more people had upfront before you jump in and say, hey, we need to use AI. Was how do we take the things that our company's good at and be known at doing it better? Or how do we take our biggest pain points and make them go away? That usually AI use cases slot pretty nicely into one of those.
Mm.
And I feel like starting there, it's not like you can't fail, but it's a lot harder to fail. You won't build the wrong thing. And I think that's what's really important with when you're in a buzzy industry and there's a lot of hype, is there's a lot of like chasing a headline or doing something because someone else is doing it or someone else is perceived to be doing it. And as a result, a lot of times that effort doesn't really yield anything because it's kind of disconnected from those business realities.
I really love how you approach that. Customer feedback, building for the right customer, making sure you're constantly iterating to get the right results is so critical. And I was just thinking about myself. I've moved a couple times, and you always, you need to get 3 to 4 estimates. They all come in a different amount, and then you're forced to choose between the moving companies. Like, well, this one's a little cheaper, but then they have better reputation, and there's all these factors. So I can imagine, just as a person trying to move, this would be super valuable for me, because I could, like, okay, this would cost, based on my house, $1,200 to move. So if I get an estimate of $5,000, I know it's probably not super accurate. But that would be, it's interesting, to your point, how it's going to transform the entire model, right? Because now people have access to so much more information than they have ever had before. And so these driving these insights at the right points in the journey can really, either, to your point, expand your market base or considerably reduce it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited. I love that. So let's talk a little bit more about, as you're progressing with Yambo and you're seeing the AI space change, on a daily basis. Let's be honest. There's a new model coming out. There's more hype here, more hype there. How do you keep up with it all? That's something that we're all challenged with. Is Do you run after the next shiny object, or do you have a more like methodical way of kind of composing all this information and making sure that you're staying up to date but not driving yourself nuts with all the hype?
Sure. So it is impossible to keep up. I mean, unless you've cracked the code, I've made my peace with the fact that there's just too much. Even having a full-time job in this space, it's just too much activity all
Yeah.
at once, and you can't keep up. So what I found, if you can't keep up and you still need to be aware of generally what's going on, that means you have to be selective about what your sources are. So I generally try to carve out time to explore. I have an AI team. I try to give them more time than I get myself to kind of look at new papers, pull down the sample code, kind of play around with it.
Yeah.
Sort of open-ended experimentation, research time to see what's going on in the space. And what I found was, as an engineer, the more technical sources have generally been more helpful. Where if you
Okay.
read like a news article on a company that's using AI to do something, oftentimes it's really fluffy. There's not a whole
Yeah.
bunch you can do about it. But if you read like an archive.org paper, or you read MIT has a pretty nice AI news section, and you can look at these kind of more technical aspects. We have a particular area that we're focusing on with Yembo. It's more vision based. So
Mhm.
I'll spend more time on vision papers than on speech recognition or these other areas of AI. And I feel like by making peace with the fact that you're not going to be able to keep up with everything, and then understanding where are the areas that you can get the most impact, and then
Yeah.
just kind of budgeting your time and saying, okay, I'm willing to spend X% of my time looking at these kinds of things. And I use the snooze feature in Slack all the time. So if someone messages me, hey, have you seen this? I will just like bundle them up until my open research time and then go binge there. I found that's easier to do than kind of like sprinkling it throughout the day,
Oh, yeah.
going down rabbit trails and getting nothing done at the end of it all. But it's really, really interesting. I feel like it's an active space, and it's it's solving a problem. At the end of the day, I think the worst thing that you can do in a startup land is, after you finish the product and you're launching and waiting for somebody to hear back. Like, if the worst thing you can hear on launch day is silence, And I
Yeah.
feel like in the AI space, the opposite of that is happening, where there's a lot of activity, a lot of interest, and it just makes it a really exciting time to be alive and to be in the space.
It's such an exciting time to be alive because it's applications across the board. I mean, I talk to people implementing in health tech, right? Like personalized medicine and biotech. And it's just like there's so much we can do, even in areas where we didn't even think we could make a lot of progress, where we can make such instantaneous progress. And I'm personally incredibly grateful to be in this time because, nothing like this has ever happened before. But with it, it brings kind of this infinite problem. And the reason I want to discuss it as infinite is because we don't know how to put boundaries around AI as well as we think we can, because it's evolving in itself fairly quickly. And so I know you mentioned in your previous talks like the MIT risk kind of matrix that they've created to evaluate some of the risk with AI, but what are your thoughts about like AGI? And as we're moving so quickly, and you said it's the next 12 to 18 months, right? What can each one of us do to have an impact in this space? What are the things that we should be looking out for?
Sure. So I used to partake a lot more in the debate around AGI. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, there's this idea of artificial general intelligence. And that's where AI is able to do all tasks that a human can do, essentially. And now we have artificial narrow intelligence, or a car can drive itself. Yembo can look at furniture. But if you take it outside of its domain, it's not really adaptable. And I feel like that those goalposts are very fuzzy. The
Mhm.
definition is really tough. What can a human do? Well, humans are very different. They have different
Yeah.
abilities. And I actually, my views on this have changed a bit in the past 6 months or so. And I feel like
Okay.
my views now are, it's probably coming way sooner than we think. And it probably won't matter as much as a lot of people make it out to be.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, those goalposts, it's a very fuzzy line in the sand. It's not very clear. So that means we could be in a world today where maybe I think we're having AGI and you think we're not. And we're both
Yeah.
correct because it's like a really fuzzy definition. But I think at the end of the day, AI is still an algorithm, it's still software. And if you look in those MIT risk databases and the things that can go wrong, it's generally what happens when you offload decisions that used to be made by a human to an algorithm. And then you run into all these kinds of issues. What happens if it's wrong? What happens if I disagree? What's the appeal process? What's the magnitude of the decision that's being made? Is that easily reversible? If it's a self-driving car deciding to crash into a tree instead of a bus, that's not a very reversible decision. If it's Yembo and we call a sofa a love seat, that's relatively reversible.
Right.
So it helps you think about this kind of framework, I would say, in a way that kind of elevates. It doesn't really matter if you have AGI or ANI or ASI or whatever, but it's still, you've got code and
Yeah.
it's doing something, and it's in a domain where previously people were required to be doing that task. And algorithms sometimes have bugs. Like algorithms sometimes make mistakes, and AI is generally trained on historical data. If it's not trained on historical data, it's often trained on synthetic data. But
Yeah.
both of those cases have the problem of you can only look back. You can only train on what's happened before. So if somebody tells you they have AI that can predict the future, I wouldn't believe them, because by nature of how these algorithms and models are trained, they're looking at historically what had been done before. Now, I think it's capitalizing on the fact that a lot of work and a lot of tasks that we do in our jobs are very tedious.
Mhm.
So training on historical data when you're trying to do speech synthesis or speech recognition is going to work relatively well because there are only so many syllables in the English language. But if you want to say, hey, what business model should I adapt in the next 2 years? I think those are the kinds of problems that are relatively tough for AI. And I don't see us being on a trajectory to give a good answer. But I do see us being on a trajectory where if you want that kind of co-pilot model, or this agent concept, where I'm trying to decide as a business leader what should my business model be, and I want the AI to run different scenarios for me to talk about pros and cons, to point out risks that I may have overlooked. I think that's really where the value is going to be. And honestly, I don't think it cares so much. I don't think it matters so much if it's ANI, AGI. I think it's more, how do we leverage this tool to be able to do our jobs better and to not spend so much time doing more tedious things, and to spend our time doing things that are more impactful and that really move the needle.
you're speaking my language. You know, it's always been my dream to be a princess when I was growing up, and I've realized after visiting England and what happens to princesses sometimes, you know, like being beheaded, that maybe that's not the best option. But over time, you know, as AI came around, I was thrilled that my princess dream could live on in a different way. That now, you know, I could potentially have all these agents that can do all those tedious things that I don't enjoy doing for me. And then I can enjoy, you know, the things that I enjoy doing and doing those more. So I think in the end, as people are fearful right now, they're not sure how to react to AI, what to do with it. They're forgetting that each one of us has this incredible opportunity to really follow our dreams and our passions, and it's scary in its own way. But because we've never had that consideration as a human race, it was all about, you know, how do you make do with all the risks and threats and wars and whatever else, that was famine that was happening, right? And now we have a way to solve it using technology in some ways. um so as we look forward, you said, why did you pick, I keep going back to 12 to 18 months, but why do you think that 12 to 18 months period is so crucial? I guess still trying to understand why it's that period.
Sure. Well, it probably doesn't help that I threw the number out with no explanation and we kind of moved on. But yeah, happy to unpack that a bit more.
Thank you.
I think if you look at the tech revolutions in the past,
Yeah.
there's a period where something becomes possible, and I like to call this the phrase where it's barely possible.
Mhm.
Where if you think about when the internet came out, if I wanted to send you a note and I had to put it in a letter and put it in the mailbox, it would show up a couple of days later. So there was a while where email was barely possible, where the technology was there, but it kind of takes time to propagate through society. And when we're in that early 90s era and the internet exists, there's a lot of dust that kicks up.
Mhm.
And it's not usually just the technology companies that go and they usually kick the dust, but then it's the businesses that use the technology that have to figure out, how do I integrate this into my system? And in the early 90s, most companies didn't have support email addresses. They had 1-800 numbers. And then this technology became barely possible. They figured it out. They've incorporated it. And now if you look at pretty much any company today, there's not a whole lot of innovation going on in that area. There's just a way that it is done, and it's sort of
Mhm.
assumed. So if you're a company and you don't have a support email, it's kind of like weird.
Yeah.
And take that into e-commerce. When Amazon was kicking off, there was relatively reasonable pushback around, hey, it's not going to be economical to ship things. You won't be able to compete with stores that don't have any shipping fees. There was a while where that was the norm and that was kind of expected. But if you look at mobile phones when that came out, how many different phone vendors were there when LTE came out in around 2010? So there's this window where this new technology comes,
Mhm.
there's new capabilities that creates. These use cases become barely possible, where they are technically possible, but most people don't know yet. And then eventually the early adopters figure it out and kind of make a new status quo. And then it's kind of set. That's the baseline, that's the foundation. And then we build on top of that with whatever comes next. So here we are with AI, and I feel like we just had that like mass adoption moment where now everybody's thinking about either deploying it, or if they haven't already deployed it, they're strategizing around how they're going to do it. But that's not going to happen forever. Eventually, we'll incorporate it, we'll digest it, we'll figure it out, and then we'll kind of move on to the next one. So that's why I feel like this next 12 to 18 months is really important, because the rules of the road are up for grabs right now,
Mhm.
where a lot of these companies don't have it all sorted out. That's why MIT has to make a database of risks to say, hey, if you deploy AI, here's like a couple hundred things that could go wrong that you may want to think through. But eventually, those things will get incorporated, and then it'll just be kind of how we do business, where
Mhm.
I don't think, oh, I'm going to go use 5G. I just make a phone call. Or I
Right.
don't think I'm going to go send an email. I'm going to give this person a note, and I don't really care if it's an iMessage or a WhatsApp or an email. But there becomes this time where it just kind of becomes commoditized, and then it's just sort of how work gets done. So my encouragement to all of your listeners is those workflows, if you look at what it takes to be successful there, it's the people who understand the process. If you look at the mobile revolution, there was Clover, the point of sale systems in restaurants that
Mhm.
kind of became possible, where it's sort of like an iPad on a stick attached to a cash register. But
Yeah.
that's like an application of this new mobile technology in retail. And then if you look at electronic health records in hospitals, like it's all these different use cases in those industries. And it's not just like, oh, the AI came and now it's here, but
Mhm.
somebody had to figure out, how do I take this technology and how do I highlight the benefits, mitigate the risks, and make it work over here in this industry. And that's where we need all these different people that have these backgrounds that are doing those jobs now to kind of figure out, how do we retool and make it so that we can be better at what we're known for being good at, and mitigating the risks of the downsides of the things that we don't enjoy doing.
Yeah. That's super powerful. And how would you, just start with something? How would you encourage? I want to get back to that because tell us exactly what should the audience members start doing? Where should they go? How do they get started?
I think the good news is that there's not one singular thing that you need to do. Um, you have some background, probably have some job, maybe you're a student taking courses, but you have some workflow that you're doing today for getting the AI. If you look at those workflows, where are areas where there are bottlenecks? Where is it inefficient? If it's a company, when you get a 1-star review, what are people generally complaining about? And that's, by the way, a great use case. If you've got that data, you can go ask ChatGPT data analysis. It'll give you a nice little bar chart and help categorize those things for you. And the things that you're good at, how do you become great at? And once you've identified those kinds of areas, now you can have a mission. So the noise of what's going on in the news with AI,
Mhm.
you sort of have like a thing that you're shopping for, where if you're looking at, hey, people give me 1 or 2-star reviews when it takes a long time to resolve a support ticket. It's like a common business problem that I see. So now you can go and look at, okay, customer service AI bots. What are use cases that help me get them what they need when they need it quicker? And how do I measure and track the time from reporting to resolution? And you can go shop around for use cases in those areas. Or maybe it's more of a quality improving thing where you're not focusing so much on putting out fires, but how do I give more and better service to someone beyond what I was doing today? So then you can look at the offerings of your product and you can say, what if I was able to invest more time in creating this deliverable for the client? And then you can go and shop for AI products there. But I think by having a problem that you're shopping for a solution for, that model is much more likely to result in success than just, I'm going to go click around on TechCrunch, see what people are doing and see what comes up. Because then it's kind of aimless. It's like a boat with no rudder and you don't
Yeah,
really know where you're going.
I love that. So get started with something today. So Zach, how did they reach out to you and learn more about Yembo and everything you're doing? I know you're a huge speaker and there's so many amazing talks that you've done. Tell them more how to reach out to you.
Sure. If you want to learn more about Yembo, the company, you can go to yembo.ai. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm active on a couple different platforms, but LinkedIn is probably the most one I spend my most time on. So if you look up Zach Rattner on LinkedIn, you'll find me. And feel free to add me. Feel free to shoot me a DM. If you're working on something related to AI or you have a question about something that we talked about, like feel free to shoot me a note. I love it when people ask follow-up questions, and I try to share what I learn in public because I believe a rising tide kind of raises all boats, and we're all kind of figuring this out together.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. And thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure. And I'm going to try something new as well. And I already have some ideas about efficiencies I could definitely gain in my work. um, so thank you so much. And I hope people reach out to take you up on your offer because you're definitely leading the space and you're so kind to help out. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much, Vicky. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care.
All right, bye now.